Back to Nathan in Focus. FoodForward South Africa says the government must put in place a food donation policy which will allow for donation of non-sellable foods, but which are still edible, rather to be able to be donated. The country's largest food redistribution organization believes this can solve the food insecurity through its food banking model. The non-profit group has launched a petition in an effort to end hunger in the country. FoodForward South Africa Managing Director Andy du Plessis joins us now to tell us more. Andy, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Of course, it's an ongoing conversation. Essentially, what you would like is for laws that allow for donation of non-sellable food without having, of course, the repercussions in terms of law, that if you sell the food, you must be held liable and so on and so forth. Because you believe that food is still good, and this is an inhibition in terms of addressing the questions of food security. How are people responding to the petition?
Evening, Taiwan. Thank you very much for having us. Yeah, we've launched a petition just a few weeks ago, and it has been slow. It's quite a busy time across South Africa as people start to look forward to shutting down and enjoying the festive season. So it has been slow. I think we've got about 1,500 or close to 1,500 signatures so far, but we will take up our public campaign up in the new year. Essentially, the campaign centers around mostly three important factors. The first is that we want to create a set of guidelines around what food-safe donations look like. The second is liability protection for food donors. And the third is the date labeling issues. These are three key drivers of food loss and waste in South Africa. So according to the CSIR's technical report of 2021, they've affirmed their research of 2013, or updated their research of 2013, and confirmed that over 10 million tons of mostly good edible surplus food is lost or wasted throughout the supply chain. Farmers, wholesalers, retailers, producers, manufacturers, throughout that food value chain, a huge amount of good food, edible food. It may not be sellable, but it is edible, that is being dumped in landfill or being incinerated. And our view is, with the cost of living crisis escalating that it has across South Africa, and around 30 million people are food insecure, children are dying of malnutrition and starving for weeks on end. It's an untenable situation in a country that has enough food to feed all its people. So we want to make sure that government hears our petition. We've now partnered with the Harvard Law School's Food Law Project, the Global Food Banking Network, the Legal Resource Center in South Africa, and the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, when we partnered and put our resources together, and we're going to present government with a set of proposals around a food donations policy, and we're hoping that government will sit down with us, the Office of the President, hopefully, someone in the Office of the President. We met last week with the Department of Social Development, the National Department of Social Development, and they've expressed their support for a food donations policy, and they agree with us that it is the low-hanging fruit to address the problem of hunger in South Africa. Just by the way, we did a survey with the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa members, and we found that 76% of respondents said that if liability issues were taken away, they would donate more surplus food. And then 51% of respondents said if they had clear donation guidelines, what can be donated, then they would also donate more. So clearly throughout the food value chain, there is appetite. People want to donate more, but they are concerned about food safety. They're concerned about liability double.
For clarity of those who want to support your petition, let's just go through the guidelines again. What are you proposing would be the guidelines that would guide which food to be donated?
Yeah. So we are making three proposals out of three major proposals. The first is food donations. We have a clear set of guidelines around what food to donate. In fact, the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa has just finalized a document providing issues around what food safety looks like. So one of the key drivers around food loss and waste is date labeling issues. So we want to make sure that sell by and best before issues can be donated as well, so that we can get more food unlocked throughout the food supply chain. And then the Consumer Goods Council has put together a set of recommendations around guidelines for what is food safe, what can be donated, what you need to do to make sure that it is food safe before it is given to people. So we do have a clear set of guidelines now in place to make sure that food safety is preeminent throughout the food donations process. And the second one is, of course, liability protection to make sure that that food is able to be donated, and then the date labeling issues double.
Yeah. Sell by best before. I mean, what are you suggesting? Are you suggesting that should be extended, or at least even if it has reached its sell by date, how much allowance do you think should be given to those who want to donate that food?
Yeah, so a lot about the sell-by and best before dates are recommendations that are made to make sure that consumers are aware of where the product's lifespan is. But we know for a fact that things like peanut butter, preserves, canned goods are still good for human consumption for months and even years after those recommended guideline dates. And so what we are saying is those sell-by and best before dates are a guideline, and we're suggesting to our donors, that our beneficiaries that receive our food, one, test the food and make sure that it is food safe. So open the goods, see what it looks like. Does it still look normal? Does it smell normal? And just taste it before you consume, produce or prepare food for large quantities of people. So we have clear guidelines in place. Incidentally, Thabo, our organization, FoodForward SA, has been operating for 13 years now, and we've never had an issue around food safety, and we donate surplus food to 2,750 of our beneficiary organizations every single month. So we know what food safe foods look like, but we need to make sure that we drive down this food loss and waste, especially as everybody is working towards SDG 2030 and SDG 12.3, especially sustainable consumption and production. We need to make sure that we look at mitigation factors and adaptation throughout the food supply chain, so that suppliers know they can donate these goods to food banks like FoodForward SA and others, that is safe for human consumption and edible. May not be sellable, but it is edible, Thabo.
Yeah. So on the protection from liability, I mean, FoodForward South Africa and other food banks of the likes might take precaution, as you put it, might open the food, might test, might make sure that it's not food that is not dangerous or harmful to those that you're donating to. But if we remove all liability, or we put a blanket protection liability, what happens to those who might not be as diligent and as vigilant as you are as FoodForward South Africa?
Absolutely, good point, Thabo. But we are not proposing blanket liability. We are proposing liability within particular frameworks. So, for example, countries like France, like Italy, like Israel, Paraguay, the United States, they all have issues where they've relaxed liability, not completely done away with liability, but relaxed liability. So the onus is still on the food donor or the manufacturer or the supplier to make sure that the food is, number one, that it is edible, that it is good for human consumption, that there are no harmful dents on cans, for example, that there's no leakages. So there are a number of measures that suppliers and food owners still need to take. So we are not talking about blanket liability, but liability within a particular framework, so that they make sure that from their end, by the time that food is donated, that it is food safe. And they already have these processes in place. Manufacturers, large manufacturers have divisions, large divisions that deal with food safety. So they have these processes in place where they can check this food before it is donated onwards to organizations like FoodForward SA. And like I said, in the last financial year alone, we were donated over 12,000 tons of food, allowing us to provide 48 million meals across that 2,750 beneficiary organizations of ours across the country. So it is possible, it is doable. We just need to make sure that we operate within the recommended guidelines in the food donations policy we're recommending.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on, Andy Plessis. He is the Managing Director of FoodForward South Africa there.